Wow, this screen capture came out a lot blurrier than I thought. I think I better read it. Did you like the 4:3 aspect ratio in the new video? Looking forward to people watching my channel on a tube TV in 2021. I think I can do that.
Today I'd like to talk about another series that deserves a little more attention. Today's anime is about dogs hunting bears in the Japanese mountainside. It's Silver Fang from 1986. Ginga Nagare Boshi Gin, or Silver Fang as some may know it, takes place in the mountainous northern regions of Japan. The story looks in on a hunter as he makes his way through a sizable snowstorm. Locals have sighted a bear in the surrounding area, so it's up to Old Man Gohei and his trusty bear dogs to get rid of it before it causes any trouble. Unfortunately for him, this is no ordinary bear. This is the legendary Akakabuto, a red-backed monster bear that's way too much for any one man to handle. An entire ambush takes place in the blink of an eye, and before you know it, Gohei has 3 less dogs and 1 less ear to his name. After that, the anime flashes forward to the present, where the hunt for this monstrous bear rages on. During his first encounter, he ended up escaping by shooting out one of its eyeballs, but unfortunately, this had the unintended side effect of wrecking its nervous system in the process. Unable to hibernate and growing larger every year, it's been roaming the mountains ever since. On the other side of the mountain, we get introduced to the second central character of the anime, Gohei's grandson, Daisuke. He's overseeing the birth of a new litter of puppies, and he's absolutely overjoyed that a rare silver-colored striped Akita has just been born. Silver Akitas are a pretty rare sight, so Daisuke names him Gin, the Japanese word for silver, to commemorate the occasion. Wanting to show him off, he looks for the puppy's father, but unfortunately he's on the hunt with Old Man Gohei, and a storm has barreled down on the village, blocking anyone from exploring the mountainside. In typical shonen fashion, Daisuke decides to steal a snowmobile and heads into the mountainside undeterred. It's been days since Gohei went hunting, and this entire time he's been trapped in a crevice with his one surviving hunting dog. The monster bear has been blocking their escape path, trapping them without food or water for days on end. With a broken leg and no other options, Gohei cuts it off at the knee, hoping that he can give his dog the strength that it needs to escape. Luckily, his grandson and the young puppy arrive just in time, but even crashing an entire snowmobile into the bear doesn't even faze it. Watching in awe, the newborn puppy sees his father fight to his last breath, and just like his grandfather before him, another dog gets added to the pile. And so, the story of 3 generations of bear dogs unfolds, and the endless fight against the monster bear Akakabuto begins. This first episode does an absolutely fantastic job of building suspense, and it really sets the tone for the rest of the series. You get to see Gin go through training, eating bear meat and growing up, and even Daisuke himself takes up a bow and arrow to hunt some bears of his own. At first, it seems like a story about a dog and his boy training to become the #1 bear hunters in the country, but somewhere around episode 6, the story drops the human characters entirely. Not only is Akakabuto berserk from lack of sleep, but he's also grown to over 5 times the size of a normal bear. Reports say that he's amassing a bear kingdom in the mountains, so in order to fight him, Gin's gonna need an entire dog army. This is when Gin becomes the main character, so you end up with an anime about dogs fighting over territory for the rest of the series. Now, I don't know if you can call dogs manly, but if it weren't about a bunch of dogs fighting bears, You could replace the entire cast with samurai, and the characters would largely feel the same. Alliances are formed, characters make noble sacrifices, and we're introduced to every breed of dog that you can imagine. I think the idea was to make a distinct cast of characters, while also giving the show a lot of interesting set pieces to work with. If it took place entirely in the mountains, you would probably get bored of it, but every few episodes has them visiting a new part of Japan while they're recruiting more dogs, which gives it a sense of adventure, keeps it from getting stale. Let's talk about the music for a second. People have been writing stories about bears since the dawn of time, but when Akakabuto's theme starts playing, you can really feel the cold wind chill you down to your bones. There's something to be said about the raw emotion the soundtrack has, and it really helps add to the atmosphere. By far, the most memorable and interesting aspect has to be the reality of it. Dogs bleed, necks get sliced off by bears. And for a show aimed at a general audience, there's significantly more action than you would expect. Most people would consider it pretty tame by today's standards, but its depictions of dogs hunting bears was so shocking to 1980s viewers that it was heavily truncated in a number of countries. Most notably, its finished release was edited down into 5 VHS tapes, where it was toned down significantly to comply with broadcast standards at the time. However, in the face of that, it gained such a large following that many people consider it one of the all-time classics. In Finland specifically, there was a time where you couldn't find somebody that didn't know Silverfang's name. So popular was this anime that in 2011, series creator Yoshihiro Takahashi was invited to anime convention TrackCon as a celebrated guest of honor. 1 year prior to that, it was the #1 selling manga in the country, so his works are currently more popular in Finland than they are in his home country of Japan. His works are so popular over there that they've translated all of his side stories, all of his spin-offs, and even his manga about Lassie, which I think is pretty cool. In an interview posted on fan site Ginganet, he says that when the series was published, he believed that a part of its success was because it reminded people of disappearing values, like friendship and respecting others. The series' success abroad told him that people are starting to miss those things overseas as well. In addition to being popular with people who like stories about manly dogs fighting manly things, it also gained a huge female fan base, which really surprised the creator. He estimates that around 80% of his fans are probably women, and that just goes to show you that everybody just loves dogs. His series are so laser focused on the subject that he even goes for walks at dog parks just so he can make some sketches for his future manga. He got the idea for this series in 1980 when he read an article about domestic dogs that ran away from their owners and lived as wild dogs in the mountains. The idea fascinated him, which led him to create the anime that we're talking about today. In 1987, the series won the Shogakukan Manga Award for shonen manga, and 25 years later, it spawned a sequel about Gin-san as the 4th generation of bear dogs in the mountains of O. This version of the show tried to bring in a new audience, but it's largely a direct sequel, even though I don't think it's trying to be. Over 15 years on from the events of the original, a new threat is eliminating dogs at an even faster rate than Akakabuto ever did. Running out of ways to fight it, it's up to Weed, a new dog who keeps popping up no matter how hard you try to get rid of him. Many characters, both new and old, show up to guide Gin's son towards being the new pack leader, and while Ginga Nagareboshi Gin was a self-contained story about dogs fighting bears, Guido relies on you seeing that first series for a lot of its emotional impact. I won't get into any specifics, but it treads a lot of the same territory as the original, making me wonder why they would tell the same story twice. Maybe I've just seen the 80s series too many times, but something feels really off about the whole thing in a way that I can't really put my finger on. For one, they really toned down the action, which was a large part of why I enjoyed the original so much, and what little is there is implied or changed in a way to make it a lot less memorable. There's also something to be said about the art style too. Gin's son has these big round puppy dog eyes that make him look kind of like a bobblehead. and the overall tone is much softer than I would expect. I'm guessing they wanted to sell a bunch of toys when the anime came out, and with Guido and Gin being such iconic characters, it's no surprise why they went in that direction. Even if you've never heard of the Akita dogs of Japan, you're probably familiar with the story of Hachiko, a good dog who waited for his missing master for almost 10 years. The Akitas are considered a national treasure, so maybe it's a marketing thing where they wanted to make it look more like a modern anime. Honestly, this is probably one of those things where the people in the comments can point it out better than I can, but the whole thing just has this plastic feeling to it that was very common for shows of the early 2000s, and the original has these real thick stylized outlines that I felt were much more organic and easy to watch. I thought it might have been a little bit too hard on it, but in this one interview I read, the creator said it was pretty rough too, which is probably why it's never gotten another anime. That said, the series still continued in manga form and has over 100 volumes at the time of this writing. Guido was then followed with Ginga Densetsu Riki, the side story about Gin's father, Ginga the Last Wars, the story of Guido's kids, and finally Ginga Densetsu Noah. The creator was quoted as saying that he'd like to beat the all-time record of volumes set by the manga Koshi Kame, so he's still writing stories about dogs, even today. Silver Fang was serialized in Shonen Jump from 1983 to 1987, but even though it shared pages with famous series like Fist of the North Star and JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, it looks like it's been largely ignored in recent years. I went and checked out the manga to see how the story continues, and it has Gin fighting wolves that summon tornadoes with ninja chanting, so apparently the series just goes completely off the rails after that anime ends. Needless to say, it's got a pretty dedicated following, and in 2020, Japan put out a cat-style musical about it, with singing, costumes, and instead of cats, it's people in dog suits. So if you know Japanese, and you're into musicals, and you're in Japan, and you're already a fan of this series, then maybe that's something to look into. It's funny to think about it, but the entire 80s anime may have been an afterthought. Ginga ended at a shorter than normal 21 episode run, which is just shy of the 26 that most anime ended at back then. The anime that took its time slots ended up being Saint Seiya, but despite its shorter than average run, it's very well paced and ends on an absolute high note. As of 2020, Ginga Nagare Boshi Gin has no English release, but there are some English fan subs if you're really tenacious and you know where to look. But if you're growing tired of the typical shonen shows and you want something completely different, I recommend this series as a change of pace. It's odd to say something from over 30 years ago is a breath of fresh air, but if you want to see an anime about dogs fighting bears, set to 1980s synth music, I don't think you're going to find it anywhere else. If you enjoyed this video and you want other people to see it, please leave a like. I hear that really helps with the search results. And if you want your cell phone to explode with notifications at 4 a.m. in the morning, hit the bell and you'll know exactly when I put a new video out. Thank you very much for watching this video all the way to the end. Have a wonderful day.